Well, good morning to you, and we are going to get things started here as we have hit 10 o'clock here promptly. And on behalf of the Sedalia Area Chamber of Commerce as well as Lam Tech, we do welcome you to our webinar, The Home Office Worker and How to Remain 100% Effective. I'm Doug Sokolowski, the account manager for Lam Tech, and again, we do appreciate you here this morning. Before we get started, we do have a couple of housekeeping items to review. We do have everybody muted, so there's no background noise. There is a Q&A window that's available for use for any questions or comments that you may have. In addition to introducing our guest, I'll also serve as a moderator. Our Lam Tech marketing manager, Courtney Hicks, will also pose some questions or comments to our presenter to ensure you get your answer. There will also be time available to ask questions. We'll either answer them during the webinar, or we could even set up time to answer your specific questions. Again, contact information provided at the end of the webinar for you to get in touch with us here at Lam Tech. In addition to the live webinar, we'll also provide a link to the recording should you want to review what you learned today or want to share your knowledge with another person or organization, or even want to show someone you may refer Lam Tech onto. Without further ado, again, I'm Doug Sokolowski, account manager for Lam Tech, and we thank you for your time on today's webinar. And do have a little bit of history here for you. I know that we're proud members of the Sedalia Chamber, but giving you a little insight on our history. We were founded by Robert Lam in 1999 in Sedalia. He still serves as our owner today, and we'll be hearing from him here in just a little bit. We provide managed services for businesses and organizations with our core coverage area, not only just being in the Sedalia area, but we also lie between Kansas City and Columbia, and from Brunswick on down to Springfield, as well as several other portions across the Midwest and even in regions in general. But a lot of people sometimes will ask us what it is we do. We align our IT solutions with your growth initiatives. Our goal is to take care of your technology so you can focus on your day-to-day business and stop expanding problems. We offer managed services to maintain things like the security, also help desk support, consulting, and also data recovery and backup services. Now, we do know that it's a chamber event in addition to our Lam Tech webinar. We do have a few clients that are joining us, and we appreciate your partnership. So if you do have questions that are pertinent to your particular case, we just ask that you give us a call afterwards, and we'll be glad to talk about that if you have questions that are very specific to your specific agreement. Now, we have been providing webinars monthly about a variety of topics. We invite you to visit lamtech.com, and you can view our past webinars. We appreciate your interest in learning more to improve and enhance your business strategy. And we know businesses have been adjusting this year from the office to give people the capability of working from home or even remotely in general. It's important to be 100% effective no matter the environment. And this is what we're going to be talking about here today. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce the owner and CEO of Lam Tech, Robert Lam. Morning, Robert.
Good morning, Doug, and good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time out to join us this morning. I want to thank the Chamber again for inviting us and asking us to deliver this presentation and share with you some experiences that we've had basically since a lot of the pandemic has begun, but we built upon that for the last 20 years. We've been developing remote office solutions, and of course, as the years have grown past, that technology has evolved, and things that we do today were just next to impossible 5 or 10 years ago. So we're going to talk about 3 key topics today. A lot of this has been the genesis of course, the thing that we dread to hear the most about is the pandemic. But that has really changed not only the way we work, but where we work. Many of us have found that we can work from home as effectively as we can from sitting in our office. The key element, which we're going to discuss today, is having the proper resources to do our job. So the 3 considerations that we have are based on our experience with our existing clients. We also, as part of our due diligence when we're engaging with new prospects that turn into clients, we see what they've done, the challenges that they may still be having, and try to present them with solutions to improve in that environment and help them grow and improve their experiences from working at home. Another key element of our experience is what we at Lam Tech do from our perspective. You know, one of the last topics for today, which is one you'll rarely sit in and join us, or at least join a presentation I do that doesn't cover security. I'm kind of the guy that is trying to pick apart why something won't work or what the vulnerability is, and that's mainly because of the risks that are out in the world today, the things that you hear in the news. So we're going to talk a bit about that. I had kind of a surprise edition. We received some new data from one of our security vendors, SonicWall, that is really going to kind of tie all this together and maybe give you some clarity on why so much of this is important. So moving along, let's talk about the easy stuff first. And in terms of ease, I mean, you need your devices to work from home, and depending on what you do, you know, you're going to try to match or align your resources with what you need to be able to do and work effectively from home. If you'll notice, I'm going to probably use the word effective rather than productive, because those are somewhat subjective. I mean, I think as a business owner, I may have a different perception of what productivity is versus other business owners. It's really kind of a difficult thing to judge when you're thinking in those terms. But being effective is getting your job done, being able to do it accurately, still being able to do it efficiently. All of those components really roll into being productive, but the end game is that we want people to be able to do their job and also do it within a kind of financial framework that's affordable for everybody. So when we speak of your resources, it's no longer just having a PC and a monitor. There's a lot more to consider. And that's why we're going to kind of float back and forth between some HR things, because certain people require certain resources. You take an accounting person that finds himself having to work from home. They're going to need the ability to possibly have a scanner with their printer. You know, maybe they're going to need 1, 2, or 3 monitors, depending on if they're working on if they're used to working on spreadsheets and having multiple screens open at the same time. Customer service people who might have 1 or 2 screens. So you need to define what that person's role is. Most companies, many companies already have those pretty specific job descriptions and job roles defined. But if you don't, I encourage you to do that, because that way, if we find ourselves where we are, I won't say forced, but we find ourselves where we have to work from home, that it won't be kind of a fire drill of saying, do I have everything for my accountant to be able to work from home and do their job effectively? And then you start weighing the cost. Well, if they only have 1 monitor, is that second monitor worth the expense, or are you going to ask them to buy the monitor? Everybody has different ways of doing that. The idea being that you can provide an effective environment for people to work within, with the proper resources that doesn't, 1, introduce additional or too much additional support costs or points of failure, but also 2, where you're not looking at a great expense for additional hardware and then keeping track of those assets and things like that. So when you look at the list that we have before us, you know, the PC or laptop, the monitors, the printers, those are kind of common. UPSs, I would definitely suggest having. You don't have to have the $300–400 UPS. You can get desktop like APC battery backups. Mainly the reason you have those is not to sustain, like if they lose power for a long time, but if they are working on a spreadsheet or they're doing something of a critical nature and they don't automatically save it. If, you know, homes, I don't know about your home, I live out in the country, it doesn't take much for my lights to flicker, and it can be a pretty sunny day on a day like today, but the wind blew a dead limb out of a tree and bounced a neutral into a hot wire for just a split second, caused my lights to flicker. But guess what? My PC just rebooted, and the spreadsheet that I've been working on for hours, days, or months has now gotten corrupted or messed up. So you're going to want to think about things like that. And again, it's not introducing a great deal of expense, but again, it's these, you're now looking at an extension of your office. And so what is your risk tolerance for events like that to happen? The next layer you look at is like your office phones. Does this person, how do they communicate? Are you set up in your office today to have people working from home on something we call a soft phone, where the phone is an extension of your office through their PC, or does it require a physical phone? I'm providing you today a laundry list of things to think about. Webcams, speakers, microphones, or headsets. Those are the three key elements if you're wanting to do any type of video conferencing, collaboration among your teams, or if you're communicating to your clients like we are today talking to you. These are, again, I will say this, a year ago, these were fairly reasonably priced. But when everything started falling apart in February and March, there was a massive run on webcams, microphone headsets, and laptops. And webcams that we normally were able to buy for $50 to $75, those very webcams were then all of a sudden $300 if you could even find them. Same for headsets. So it's an unfortunate reality of supply and demand. But I think that, and George might correct me, I think that some of these are becoming a little bit more available, but I don't think the supply chain has gotten back to where it was. And quite honestly, I'm not sure when it will because of the events that are still occurring today. So what I would suggest you do is prioritize what you use at the office, how often, how frequently do you use the resource, and then imagine to yourself, okay, if I don't have that when I'm working at home, what will I not be able to do? I can give you a real-time example of this. When Lam Tech worked from home, I believe for the guys that worked, that we sent home even 5 days before we went to a total shutdown, we were all working at home for I believe 92 days. And during that time, our bookkeeper was still paying bills. We were still invoicing, still doing payroll, doing the whole 9 yards, and our office sat here empty. We did discover that one of the things that Carrie missed is that from time to time when she would pick up the mail, because we still get some bills that our providers don't give us electronically, she scans those. Well, she didn't have a scanner. So we were able to get a $99 scanner and drop ship it to her house. And then I went by and we got it installed. But it's little things like that that help you keep what we refer to as business continuity. Everything keeps flowing. So we've covered all of the things of the resources and in these aspects. And the final question is that if you buy all this stuff, or if your team member or you yourself are going to have all these, where are you going to place it? You know, that's something I think that often gets overlooked. I've heard stories about people who set up their office in their dining room. And in fact, George will remember this. We had a call with a vendor, and that vendor rep was working from home. It was the most agonizing call I've ever had, because, and feel for the guy, he was working at home. He was set up on his kitchen table. Kids were going bonkers in the background. His wife was also working from home, and she was doing a video conference on an iPad walking around behind us. It was a zoo. It was almost like the debate the other night. It was crazy. But anyway, so think about this, talk with your people and find out, okay, where are you going to sit? Is there anything we can do? So once it's in place, the two things that you want to think about, are they going to have to take it down and put it together very many times because of life in the home? Do they have to remove it because they're eating dinner on the dinner table? Or because they're having company over? The more times you take this stuff apart and put it together, the more time they're going to spend messing with it, connecting it, than maybe the benefit of having it there. And then the second thing is, which is again my mantra, is who can hack, who works on it, who has access to it? Is it going to be secure? We talk about this, and we will a little bit later as well, that there's always a potential that you're going to have a child sit down. If you've walked away to get a cup of coffee, you want to make sure that they can't get on and send emails, delete files and things like that if you have no control over it. So those are some things to think about from a standpoint of the environment. Another thing that we discovered, and it may sound not important, but when you're sitting here working from home, you're sitting. So we actually had two people that asked to come in and get their office chairs, because their chairs at home they didn't have right. So we created a list for our people that we say, if you're going to work from home, here are the resources that you're required to have so you can log in and do your job. It's a twofold thing. One is that we know if they have the proper components and resources and we have things that if it's a new employee, they can grab this list and they know what to have installed on their desktop and everything before the bell rings that we have to go home and work from home, or somebody has to do a self-quarantine, or someone has a family member who's gotten sick and then ends up they're quarantined as well. We've encountered all of this, and so but it's so seamless now because we've got a pretty direct document of, okay, here's what's required to be able to work from home. And we view it as not only a benefit for us that we have the employee at home, but if you test positive for COVID, or someone in your household tests positive, but you're asymptomatic, you can't come to work. But if you're able to work from home and do your job, then you don't have to use personal time. You can still earn a wage while you're at home, and the employer can still get the effectiveness and I'm going to say it, the productivity of that employee. So life goes on. It may not be perfect. It may not be like what we're used to doing, but folks, we need to just prepare. Things are going to change, and it's not going to be like it was before. And it's really probably not so bad. We were able to do this, and from a technical standpoint, from a process standpoint, and even a lot of times from an HR standpoint, this is doable. There's other adjustments, of course, you're going to make in your business to accommodate this, if that is even an option for you. Obviously, if you're a retail store or something like that, it's not gonna be very convenient. But a lot of the professional services and the nonprofits that we work with today have found it very useful, and they can continue to provide the services to their clients, which that is the whole bottom line, is that we're going to enable you to be able to support the people that are counting on you for so many things. So moving along, so we don't get hung up too long on this, because we've only got an hour. We look at communication versus collaboration. We used to talk about, hey, we're working from home, and we used to be happy with just using internet browser and email because we felt good about working from home. plus maybe we'd take a few files home on a USB key, or we'd have our laptop. And, at that time and at that point, it's really communicating to our customers and coworkers via email, or we'd call them on our cell phone or our home phone. And then we worked on every file that we could carry. That's really what it boiled down to. Well, that's kind of old school. As technology over the past 5 years has evolved, so has our workspace and abilities. With the growing acceptance of reliable hosted applications, collaborating is now become mainstream and added the ability for us to work on the same files and sharing the same information seamlessly from our desktop with our peers, with our clients, with our vendors. The ability to have virtual meetings. This is somewhat of a virtual meeting in the sense that I'm talking to you, but if we turned on everyone's mic, boy, it would be fun then, because then everybody would be talking at the same time. But we could share desktops and data, presentations like this. And the best part of it is, because of the advances in technology and people's technical abilities have excelled over the many years, that you don't require a technical specialist to run a Zoom meeting. Gosh, look at the last 9 months. Zoom is a common day word. You can probably talk to almost anyone you know and say something about Zoom, and they know exactly what you're talking about, and they really pretty much know what you can do with it. It's pretty simple. So once the setup is done, and it's a minimal amount of training, you can collaborate with your staff, your clients, and partners just as if you were sitting at your office. Interestingly enough, just in case you're curious, I'm sitting in my office, Courtney is sitting at her desk, George is sitting at his desk. We're all in the same building, but we're trying to stay a little bit separate from each other. But we're able to work very effectively, and it's doing great. So, that's a big key thing. So check-in time looks like we're at 10:22, so we're doing pretty good. We're gonna switch gears for a minute. I've talked to you about resources. I've talked about working from home and why we're going to work from home. So let's come into the final portion of this presentation. So we have a security vendor called SonicWall, and we've used them for just about 18 of our 20 years. So we've got a very deep relationship with them and understanding of that entire suite of products that they have. They provided some current information that I think will kind of raise your awareness and see how serious we are and how serious the issue is regarding cyber threats. Since February and the whole COVID thing came out, the bad guys, the bad actors have discovered that, hey, we've got a feature-rich, target-rich environment here with people who are working from home. At least 20 different types of attacks have been, and this is categories. This isn't just 20 single attacks. This is like categories. So they're malware, ransomware, cryptomware, Trojans, rats. That's the fun one. That's the remote attack where they try to take over machines. And pardon me, spam, and of course scareware and others. Interestingly enough, while malware itself has dropped 33%, and that's the one where they just drop little payloads and things on your machines, and visualize malware kind of as a shotgun, where they're just aiming and shooting and hoping stuff falls on machines, versus ransomware, where they're being very deliberate. And those deliberate attacks globally are up 20%. But frighteningly enough, 109% in the United States. It has just skyrocketed. The number of attacks and attempted attacks are going on. People say, why? Well, a big reason is that it's what's hiding in your office files. And remember, we're working from home. So these files are going back and forth through the internet. They are also being hosted because so many people are subscribing and using Office 365. And of course, that's Microsoft's platform, which is great and it's secure, but like anything else, it needs to be managed, and there are vulnerabilities if you don't have the tools in place. So there's a 176% increase in malicious Office files. So an example would be you receive an email and it's got a Word document attached, and I'll just use me as an example. I get an email from George and it's got an Excel spreadsheet attached because it's getting to be budget time, and it's the 2020-21 budget for me to review. Well, let's make sure that it's first from George, and then let's also double check that file. And that can be done a number of different ways with your antivirus software, your email, if you're subscribing to any kind of a email security, that it will scan those as well. Even if you go and open that file and you see links in that file, like, you know, click here to look at this report, we don't do that. So you might want to still slow down and see if that is in fact an accurate depiction or an accurate file for you to be using. These three topics are worrisome because it's worrisome if you're just working in your office by yourself, but now you have your staff and ownership and management working from home as well. There is a need to be extra vigilant with everybody who is working with your files and your resources within your office, and even your folks at home with their personal computers, that they are properly secured. And another point, tailing back to the resource slide, a lot of folks say, well, you know, we don't need to buy a computer for our accountant at home because they've got their own PC. Okay, then you have to kind of tail off to additional questions. How is that PC protected? Do they have antivirus software? Do they have any kind of malware, anti-malware software? Are they the sole user, or is this a shared PC with the family, and do they all share the same username or same profile on that PC? So it gets to be very, I don't really want to use the term complex, but it does get very intertwined with the flow chart of questions that you have to ask yourself when you're looking at remote working. It's not impossible. It's just something you need to think about. And if you don't quite have all the answers, or you're not sure what questions to answer, that's where LambTech comes in. So let's talk about a couple other things. I have mentioned this in about every one of my security presentations, but a virtual, and you don't have to show your hands, it's just one to say, yep, that's me. But how many people have a home router that their internet provider put in when they got their internet, or they say that's all I need, or went out and bought any number of Belkin, SMC, Linksys, just pick one, from Walmart or Staples or whatever, because hey, it had a wireless, it also supported a wireless network, and I need wireless in my house for my iPads, my iPhones, my everything portable. I pretty much probably touched on everyone. Then you add on that since we are working from home, that and with the internet being as it is, and we're stuck at home, we're streaming like crazy. I mean, we're watching Netflix, we're watching we're listening to Pandora, we're watching YouTube TV, every kind of online, Hulu, you name it, Roku, that's out there. Every one of them you have to have an account for. And it's typically your email address, and then it's typically some kind of a password. Then ask yourself this: how many folks out there are using the same username and password on everything? Because it's easy to remember, and hey, it's just my Roku box. Nobody's gonna hack my Roku box. Crazy. It won't. Nobody will do it. Well, guess what? They do. In fact, the attacks have increased, and it's increasing at such a rate that they're gonna pass both 2018 and 2019 levels by the end of the year. 20.2 million Internet of Things attacks. That's all your little routers, your streaming music devices, your TVs, you name it. You would be surprised if you took and printed out a list of all the things that you had attached at home. And here's the other thing, folks. If you use the same password on all those, why? It's because, hey, it's my password and it's easy to remember. What are the chances that the passwords that you use to secure those devices, to secure those accounts, which, hey, if you're using Amazon Prime Music, guess what? It's tied to your Amazon account. And how many of you have your credit card attached in Amazon? And if they can dump all those passwords and they know even one or two of your emails, it's just a matter of time before someone can try to hack in and get your Amazon account. They can start buying things. They can try to get your credit card. So it just takes one. So it's a hassle. It's such a hassle to try to keep track of those, but I would definitely encourage you to take the time and try to get with those, get those different devices and make sure that you have them set up separately. Now, a question comes up, and here's kind of a little pitch for you, but people are saying, how do I keep track of all these passwords? We did a webinar last week on an application that we use and provide and encourage everyone to utilize at some level called LastPass. If you go back to our webinar, our list of webinars, you will be able to see the webinar about LastPass. And then if you have questions, we're happy to answer them for you. So let's wrap this up with one more slide on cyber threats. So here we are globally. Remember the earlier side, ransom attacks were up 20%, but 109% increase in the United States. That's 1 in 12 customers saw some type of an encrypted attack, whether it was a successful or not, 1 in 12. Intrusion events, that's where people actually can get in on your network, has increased 19%. And cryptojacking, where they're stealing passwords and they're trying to run ransomware and things like that, there's 41.4 million attacks. There's another stat that I didn't share because I wasn't going to bore you with stats, but I hear this a lot when I have these meetings and I talk with individuals, is that, you know, we're just a little company and we're out here in Missouri. No one's going to come after our little domain. Well, interestingly enough, California had, I believe the number was over 300 million attacks. The state of California recorded that, not just cryptojacking, but all kinds of events and things happen. And would you believe that the state of Kansas outpaced the state of California on that? And people say, why? The reason is that unfortunately, I believe that the Midwest kind of feels like, hey, we're kind of small potatoes here. The big companies that are on the coasts and all the outlying areas, they're the ones that, you know, all the bad actors from China, Russia, oh my gosh, the list is arm's length long. They're going to go after them. Well, the thing of it is that if we're easy prey, if we're not trying to hold ourselves to a high standard of security, then they're going to come after us because they're going to go, hey, here's the wink link. All they want is a foothold. They just imagine the country and the whole internet and everything as a big office building. Got the best security, you know, all kinds of motion sensors and door locks and everything to get in. But then somebody says, you know, I'm going to go outside and smoke a cigarette, and they don't have their key with them to get back in. So they put in like one of those little door triangle blocks that shoves under holds the door open. Essentially, every time you use the same password and you let everything sit for months and never change passwords, that's effectively putting an electronic door jamb to hold the door open and somebody can get in. And I realize that sounds like a pretty bold statement, but we can go back and look at past at things that have occurred in the past. You know, earlier breaches, when we were start building awareness, it was a plumbing vendor who opened the door for someone to get into Target. They didn't break into Target. They broke into the vendor, who was very lax in security, that then had access to Target. So keep that in mind when you, and the same thing can happen when you have people working from home, working remote, working from Starbucks, working from the airport, for anybody who's still flying. Those things are prevalent and they're out there, so we really need to keep on top of them. So, you know, I always like this with my grandson. He loves the saying, you know, in superhero movies, and if you watch Netflix, Prime, or Disney, you know, the common saying, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, people working from home that are accessing business resources, they have that great power now. They're the ability to access those resources, and it represents the power to access scores of data, intellectual property, sensitive financial data, your hard work. So now that I've just spooked you, let's talk about how do we protect it. So we're kind of tailing in. I've rushed through a lot of things, so maybe we could have a little extra time here. But how do we protect all these resources? Well, if you're working from home and you're sharing files, especially small, medium-sized businesses, 2 or 3 employees, they may not have reached the point where they're going to use a platform like Microsoft Teams or you know, some of the variety of ones out there. But you know, folks use Google Drive, Dropbox, Box.net, Amazon Cloud Share. There's an abundance of them out there. But the one common denominator is that these files often reside on both your PC, and then they're synchronized, the changes are synchronized to the respective vendors. The question you should ask yourself is, and let's just pick one so we can focus on it, but let's say, for example, you use Dropbox. If you use Dropbox and you've got the little client on your machine, on your desktop or your laptop, excuse me, and you make it, and you open up an Excel spreadsheet that's in your Dropbox folder on your local machine, and you save it, what happens? Dropbox sees that that file was changed and automatically wants to synchronize it to the cloud. Perfect. Awesome. This is great. So what happens if your desktop, or you get an email that you open inadvertently and it drops down a little payload, and that payload happens to be ransomware, and the next thing you know, 24 hours later, you get up the next morning and you sit down and you start to work, and there's a big red box on your screen, or a box, that says, hey, your files have all been encrypted, and if you want them back, here's the email address that you can send Bitcoin. The whole scary scenario. When you reach that point, you're left with 2 choices. Either one, you pay the bad guys, which is really no fun. We've worked with people who have chosen that route because they did not have an adequate backup strategy. And it really makes you think that it's kind of like watching those kidnapping movies where, you know, it's the dark, foggy night, the bad guy's on the other side of the bridge, substitute the person that he's holding hostage, and he's holding a box of your data. and you're on the other side of the bridge and you've got a bag full of money, and you're hoping that when you pay them the money, you open up the box and your data is really in there. I mean, visualize that, and that's essentially what it is. And it's nerve-wracking as heck because it's not an immediate process. And it's very complicated because you've got to go somewhere and get a Western Union wire, then wire it to someplace in China or somewhere that you can buy Bitcoins or wherever. And then you got to send them the copy of the Bitcoin receipt, and then you wait. Every one of those steps, you wait. That wait could be 4, it could be 8, it could be 10 hours. We had one that lasted 14 hours before we got the key to start unlocking. That's kind of scary. The other option would be, hey, I'm not going to get any money because I can just restore my files. Great. But if your files on your PC are encrypted, and those encrypted files are in turn being synchronized to Dropbox, where's the backup? Because remember, Dropbox is being real handy. I am backing those up for you as we make the changes. So consequently, your files in Dropbox are encrypted as well. And the same can hold true with most of these other providers as well. So that's why you want to have a good backup strategy. And there are backup strategies for each one of these. They vary in complexity, they vary in cost, but sometimes there's, depending on what you're doing at home or how you're handling it, it's even manual intervention. But you need to be thinking about that because these are all great tools, but you need to understand your environment. It's different if you're working on a network that is managed, that it's your office and those files are on your commercial storage, your business storage, and for even like if it's an account we manage that you're using OneDrive and things like that, we include as part of our management strategy this backup component so those are backed up. You want to make sure of that because otherwise it could be devastating if it's files that oftentimes we've heard stories where people will say, hey, well, I've got my Dropbox on my PC at work and I've got Dropbox on my PC at home, and it's great because then I'm going to work on that spreadsheet that I really need to get done. So I move it over to my Dropbox, and then it's synced and it's synced at home. And that part of it's really slick, but it becomes a problem when it syncs back to Dropbox in the cloud. And oh, by the way, remember I mentioned that you've got Dropbox on your PC at work? So now your PC at work is going to synchronize with Dropbox and bring that ransomware payload back to your office. That, to me, is a game changer. So I would encourage you to audit your folks and find out if people are using Dropbox. The thing of it is Dropbox, Google Drive, Box, iCloud, all of these hosted folks can pretty much be installed all on their own without your knowledge. So for me, it's not only a concern on ransomware, encryption, and files, but what if you have a disgruntled employee that decides they want to take a bunch of files with them? Talk about slipping it out the back door by just dropping it in a Dropbox folder. It goes to their PC at home, then they disconnect Dropbox from their PC and remove it, delete those files, but they're still at home. So think about those when you're thinking about your policies at home. The third part of that is password security. I've really spent a lot of time on it, but I just can't seem to spend enough time on it. It's an ongoing challenge and discussion that we have with our clients, with our client users on the need for password security. I'm a broken record on it. However, if we look at the number of incidents that occur, 80% of the incidents that occur are driven because of poor password management. That can either be, again, using the same password, using too simple of a password, or not changing those passwords enough. So you definitely want to try to encourage that behavior, require passwords, and we would actually encourage you, if possible, with the apps that you are using for your business or the access into your business, two-factor authentication. So there's yet one more level, even if a password gets hacked, if they don't have that user's iPhone or key fob to provide that second factor of authentication, that you can still prevent access. And the final one we mentioned is physical security. Making sure that people who, if they have portable devices like laptops that are company owned, or if they have their personal laptops that can contain company data, that you have a very defined regimen of talking to these folks about not leaving those laptops in cars. I'm still amazed today to read the newspaper to see so many cars that have been broken into, where they weren't broken into. People just opened the door and removed the contents. And the things that are stolen: laptops, backpacks, purses, wallets, guns. It's amazing. And I don't know that it's absent-mindedness, but I still remind my guys, when I walk out the door, sometimes I still go around our fleet of vehicles and rattle door handles and peek inside the windows just to see. And fortunately, they're doing really, really good at that. But I think, sometimes at the end of the day, people get in a hurry. They hop out of the car, day's done, and oh, by the way, I left my laptop in the car, and then it's a game changer. So what do you do to protect from that? Well, if you do have laptops out there, the one thing that I would suggest, and if at all possible, sometimes on rare occasions, it's not so much anymore, but you're able to encrypt the hard drives on those laptops. So when you turn the laptop on, you actually get prompted for a password to boot on further, so that laptop will unencrypt, or you can have access to that encryption. If the laptop is stolen and somebody says, well, I'll just take the hard drive out of it and put it in another machine, it won't work, because the encryption has that drive effectively scrambled to prevent that. So that's a lot of information, right? And if there's some questions, we're at 10:47, so we do have a little bit of time. If you would like to put some questions into Courtney or anyone else, feel free to do so. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit. I really unloaded a lot of information on you today, but it's very time sensitive. We're still seeing a lot of activity from people either wanting or needing to work from home. Our job for our clients is to make the action and that need as easy as possible, as transparent as possible. We pride ourselves here at Lam Tech in the fact that we worked for 90+ days from home, and we didn't miss a lick. We didn't get to go on site to do some projects as we had originally planned, but our support didn't waver. We continue to get great reviews, and I know I'm bragging, but I'm kind of proud of my guys that everyone was able to do that. And talking with the sampling of our customers and their users, unless we specifically mentioned we were working from home, it wasn't clear where we were. And that we feel is the goal on getting your remote workforce effective, is the transparency that they can work anywhere you need them to, still get their job done, business goes on as usual, and continue to be able to deliver the services and sales that you need to support your business and your customers. So with that, I'm going to take a breath, take a sip of water, and I'm going to ask Doug to take over and see if we can help anyone.
Okay. Well, thanks, Rob, for all that information. We did have a couple of questions that came in, and some of them were kind of on the specific side. We do have one question that I think was probably the ultimate X factor, even for all of us at Lam Tech and things like that, is do you have any suggestions about requirements for internet connection from working from home? In this person's case, they said they have satellite internet at home and just wanted to know what you recommended for upload, download, and maybe what's good practices, because we know in a business environment, it's always good to have a backup, but sometimes when you're working at home, you may not have that luxury.
Well, that is a good question, Doug. Thanks for whoever asked that, because in terms of remote and home or working anywhere remotely, the internet is your single biggest point of failure. And the challenge in Missouri, as in many other rural locales, is that we are pretty much, if we are outside of a city of any size, relegated down to just 2 or 3 choices of internet connectivity. My guess is if you're using satellite for internet, you're in a really nice rural location, which is great, but also does have that trade-off that you're limited to what you have for internet. So what we try to do is, first of all, we set the expectation with not only the user, but also with the company that user works for, that it may not be a 100% effective solution for working at home. And then at that point, you have to determine, again, that risk reward factor, that, okay, if a particular teammate works from home and they're only able to do work at 50%, is that going to be satisfactory from a standpoint of saying, well, we would rather have them being able to work 50% effectively than not work at all? That's going to be a judgment call made by the vendor. From the technical standpoint to that question, there really isn't a table that says, well, you've got to have a minimum of 5 meg down and 2 meg up. This again turns into one of those flow charts of, okay, first of all, what are you doing from home? If you're only downloading or excuse me, reading emails and responding to emails and doing some like web-based, like if you've got an application that you basically access and can operate from within a web browser, then a 2 or 3, 4 meg download speed will probably be sufficient. And then, and of course, then satellite would, of course, very much meet that requirement. Satellites are typically weighted in downloads versus upload because it's a lot easier. They do downloads a lot easier. The big challenge on using something like a satellite is a very important term that we've covered in some past webinars called latency. And that's really the speed. Everybody thinks 2 meg, 3 meg, that is a measure of speed. It's not just speed, but it's really more a measure of capacity. The latency is how fast a packet of information travels from point A to point B. In the world of satellite, it's from point A to point B to point C, because you're talking from your ground station, your satellite dish at your house, to a satellite. I don't remember now how many thousands of miles it is in the air. I can't remember. It might be 23,000 miles, something like that. It's just about like going around the world. It has to go up to the satellite and then go back down to the internet provider and then go to wherever it was supposed to go. So if you're sitting at home, your latency measurement is done in milliseconds, and you might see that you might be 30, 50, or 70 milliseconds. That's pretty reasonable. You start getting into satellites, that could be up into the thousands of milliseconds. So 70 versus 1,000. So now when you say, well, your screen jumps and it's jittery, that's why. So consequently, satellites aren't really conducive for like connecting into remote desktops at work, because those types of connections require the ability for them to respond keystrokes and mouse movements back and forth in a pretty timely fashion. But for streaming movies and things like that, satellite can be pretty effective. So it's kind of challenging for you. And so but if you're only doing emails and things like that, it should probably be just fine. Or if you're watching like educational videos or even webinars like this, will probably work okay. it just really boils down to what application you're using. It was a really long explanation, but it's kind of hard to water that down. So if you have any more questions or follow-ups, please feel free.
We did have another question that came in dealing with do some of these threats still come into play if you're utilizing a personal computer but remoting in through some sort of VDI and security token for work?
Yes, they can still present a threat to your home computer. Now, depending on how that connection is made back to your office, whether it's through a VPN or how that connection back to your office occurs, and then also if the connection is configured, so in other words, let's say you're logged into your office and you see your network drives. If in Explorer, File Explorer, if you can see your local drive as well, then you have a risk, because effectively what has happened is that your software that establishes that connection has said, sure, I want you to also map drive C as a local drive, so your C drive at home is there plus F and G and any other drives that you have at the office. So if that exists, then yes, there is a way for, even if you're using a VPN, to make that connection. If it's set up improperly or set up without planning, there may be a reason that you need that C drive, but you need to determine if it is in fact a requirement for making that connection. The other question there is that if you're making a web-based connection to your office, again, it depends on how it's configured to make that connection. So just by making the assumption that, well, I'm connecting through a VPN, so even if I do get infected on my local drive, I'm safe, that may not always be the case. We've seen times when people are using that VPN connection to do work on their machines at the office, but they're still reading their email locally. Well, if they're reading their email locally and sending email locally, if they're infected on that local machine and it's the type of infection that jumps on into your email, then the infection can certainly occur even on a local level using a VPN connection.
Well, Rob, it looks like we've got a couple other questions that might be a little more specific to the individual clients. We're going to answer those offline and afterwards, I believe. And looks like we didn't have any more further questions come in right now, Courtney. So, Rob, appreciate your time here today. Any final thoughts before I wrap it up? Well, with that, then we do appreciate your time today and to learn working 100% effective in a home office environment with our owner and CEO, Robert Lamb. Again, if you are a current client, and I do see some of you have joined us, you want to see what you learned pertains to your agreement, feel free to reach out to us after the webinar. If you're wanting to learn more about Lamb Tech and our offerings, you can also call me direct. Of course, the number is on the screen there, 660-851-7342. Please remember, we'll also provide you with a link to this webinar, and we also invite you to also view our previous webinars online at lambtech.com. Again, we thank you for your time today, and on behalf of the Sedalia Area Chamber of Commerce and also Lamb Tech, I do hope that you have a fantastic day.